The autumn wind howled across Fort Brenton, a military base tucked deep in the hills of North Carolina. The morning was ordinary. Rows of recruits jogging across the field, trucks rumbling in formation, and the faint echo of commands slicing through the air. Yet something extraordinary was about to happen that none of them would forget. At the front gate, a man in his late 60s stepped out of a faded black pickup. His posture was straight despite his years, his eyes hidden beneath an old pair of aviator sunglasses. His jacket, worn military green with frayed cuffs, bore no insignia. He walked slowly toward the guard post, holding a small envelope in one hand. "Sir, this is a restricted base," the young guard at the gate called out. "State your business." The old man smiled faintly. "Just visiting an old friend," he said, his voice deep and calm. The guard glanced at his clipboard. "Name?" "Robert Hayes." The guard frowned. "You got clearance?" Hayes handed him the envelope. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, stamped with an emblem that looked older than anyone present. The guard barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "This isn't valid, sir. You can't just walk onto a federal base with a letter from, what is this, 1987? Hayes chuckled softly. "Seems the world's changed more than I thought." Behind the first guard, another younger one leaned against the booth, sipping coffee. "Come on, old man," he muttered. "You think you can just stroll into Fort Brenton like it's a museum tour? You retired guys always think you own the place." Robert Hayes didn't respond. He looked past them, toward the tall watchtower where an American flag swayed against the pale sky. His eyes seemed to drift, not in confusion, but in memory. "Sir," the first guard said firmly, "if you don't have proper clearance, I'll have to ask you to leave. This area is restricted to active personnel only." Hayes nodded slowly. "I understand." He turned as if to go back to his truck, but then paused. His hand rested on the door handle. He looked at them one last time and said quietly, "Tell Colonel Matthews that Iron Shade has come home." The two guards exchanged puzzled looks. "Iron Shade?" one repeated, laughing. "What is that, your old CB handle or something?" Hayes didn't answer. He got into his truck and waited. Moments later, the guard's radio crackled to life. "Gate 3, repeat that name you just said," came a sharp voice through the static. The guard looked confused. The guy said, "Iron Shade." There was a pause. Then a voice replied, trembling slightly, "Don't move him. Keep him there. Colonel Matthews is on his way." The guard blinked. "Wait, seriously?" Within 5 minutes, a convoy of vehicles pulled up. Out stepped a man in full uniform, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. He was in his early 60s but carried himself like someone used to being obeyed. His eyes scanned the area until they landed on Hayes. For a moment he just stood there, silent, disbelieving. Then in a low voice he said, "Goddamn." "Robert?" Hayes smiled. "Hello, Colonel." The colonel walked forward, dismissing the guards with a wave. "You sons of, don't you know who this man is?" The younger guard stammered. Sir, he didn't have credentials." "This man," Colonel Matthews interrupted, "saved 56 American soldiers in the Battle of Hadron Valley. He was presumed dead. His codename was Iron Shade." The air around the gate went still. The guards looked at each other, faces pale. One of them whispered, "Presumed dead?" Hayes simply smiled again. "Guess rumors of my death were exaggerated." Matthews walked up and grasped his old comrade's shoulders. "You son of a gun. Where the hell have you been all these years?" "Off the grid," Hayes replied softly. "Sometimes the war doesn't end, Colonel. It just gets quieter." The colonel nodded slowly, eyes glistening with something between pride and regret. "You're coming inside. You're not just a guest, you're family here." As they entered the base, every soldier they passed straightened their back. Whispers followed. "Is that really Iron Shade? I thought he died in '03. No way. He's a legend." They reached the operations building where the air smelled of coffee and gun oil. The colonel led Hayes into a private conference room. The walls were lined with screens and mission boards. "I never thought I'd see you again," Matthews said, pouring coffee for both. "After Hadron Valley, command said no one survived the final push. What happened out there?" Hayes stared into his cup for a moment. "We lost everything," he began. "Communications were jammed. We were pinned under mortar fire. I had a squad of 12. Only 2 of us made it past the ridge." The colonel's face hardened. "The report said everyone was KIA. They were wrong," Hayes said quietly. "The others, They didn't die right away. I carried them as far as I could. We were behind enemy lines for 6 days. No food, no backup. The last transmission I sent was under my code name, Ironshade. I thought maybe someone would pick it up. But no one did. Matthews lowered his gaze. I remember that call sign. Intel said it was a decoy transmission. Jesus. Hayes took off his sunglasses. His eyes were a faded blue, cold and tired. They buried the mission because it wasn't clean. But the men who died, they deserve to be remembered. The colonel nodded. They will be. I'll see to that, Hayes leaned back. That's not why I came. Matthews frowned. Then why are you here, Robert? Hayes looked toward the window where soldiers marched in formation. Someone's been erasing records, he said. Not just from my unit, others too. Old missions. Old names. Someone wants us forgotten. The colonel's expression changed. You're saying... I'm saying it's not over, Hayes interrupted. There's a reason Ironshade was erased. Someone in command wanted it that way, and now they're back to finish the job. Matthews stood, pacing. You have proof? Hayes reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. Coordinates, files, names, people who shouldn't be alive but are. The colonel took it slowly. You've been working this on your own? Hayes nodded. Since 2010, I tracked whispers through private channels, merc groups, off-book contractors. They all trace back to the same ghost operation, Project Meridian. Matthews froze. That's impossible. Meridian was shut down decades ago, was it? Hayes asked. Because someone out there is using its name again. And if I'm right, they've already infiltrated military intelligence. The colonel exhaled sharply. Christ, you think someone inside our own ranks? Not think, Hayes said. No. The room fell silent. The distant hum of helicopters vibrated through the glass. Matthews finally spoke. You realize what you're saying, Robert? This isn't a small conspiracy. If what you're holding is real, you're walking into a hornet's nest. Hayes smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time. The colonel leaned on the table, eyes locked on his old friend. Then I'm in. Whatever this is, we finish it together. Just like old times, Hayes nodded once. We start tonight. By dusk, the base looked different. Lights flickered across the hangars, shadows stretching across the pavement. Inside a restricted wing of the intelligence building, the two men sat surrounded by old mission reports and new encrypted data. Hayes typed with precision, decoding files one by one. They used the same encryption we developed in '98, he muttered. Same key signature. Whoever this is, they were one of us. The colonel rubbed his temples. I can't believe this. The project was supposed to be wiped after the Hadron disaster. Meridian was black ops, no records, no survivors. Hayes stopped typing. That's exactly what makes it useful. A dead project leaves no trail. He turned the screen toward Matthews. There, look at this. The colonel leaned closer. The file displayed a list of covert contractors linked to domestic security clearances, false identities, payments routed through shell companies. At the top of the list was a familiar name, Captain L. Monroe. Matthews blinked. No, Monroe died in Hadron Valley. I saw the body. Hayes looked up. Did you? The colonel's mouth went dry. You think he's alive? Hayes nodded slowly. And leading Meridian. The power flickered. The room dimmed. Hayes's expression sharpened. They know we're here. Matthews grabbed the flash drive. We've got to get this out. Secure channel? Hayes shook his head. They'll intercept it. We go old school. He grabbed a small military radio from the shelf and tuned it manually. Static hissed through the speakers. Hayes pressed the transmitter. This is Ironshade. If anyone's still listening, the past isn't buried. Meridian lives. For a moment, nothing but static. Then faintly a voice came through. Ironshade, you shouldn't have come back. The line went dead. The colonel's eyes widened. That voice, Hayes nodded grimly. Monroe! Outside, alarms began to wail. Base security was moving toward the building. Hayes turned to Matthews. They're coming for me, not you. You can still get out. Matthews shook his head. Not a chance. Hayes smiled faintly. The same calm confidence that had carried him through battlefields decades ago. Then we finish what we started. The colonel loaded his sidearm. What's the plan? Hayes looked at the terminal where the files still flashed on screen. We burn Meridian to the ground. The lights went out. Gunfire echoed in the distance, and for the first time in 20 years, Ironshade was back in the fight. Darkness swallowed the base. Red emergency lights pulsed through the hallways, painting the steel walls with a heartbeat of danger. Colonel Matthews moved first, sweeping the corridor with his sidearm. Behind him, Robert Hayes, Ironshade, walked with the quiet precision of a man who'd lived his life in chaos. "Backup routes?" Matthews whispered. "South wing's locked down," Hayes said. "Maintenance tunnel under communications deck, only way out." They turned a corner just as a squad of armed guards appeared at the far end, shouting orders. Bullets cracked against the wall as Matthews dove for cover. Hayes rolled behind a crate, his old instincts snapping awake. With controlled breaths, he aimed and fired, 2 clean shots that shattered the lights above the enemy. The hallway plunged into deeper red shadows. "Move!" Hayes barked. They sprinted through the dark, boots striking metal grates. Sirens echoed overhead. The base that had once honored heroes now hunted them like traitors. At the far end of the corridor, Hayes found the hatch leading to the maintenance tunnel. He pried it open, motioning Matthews inside first. The tunnel was narrow, cold, and smelled of oil. Water dripped from pipes above. "How long have they been watching you?" Matthews asked, breathing hard as they crawled forward. "Years," Hayes replied. "Every time I got close to the truth, someone disappeared. Old soldiers, intel officers, analysts, people who remembered Meridian. And Monroe?" Hayes's voice hardened. "He was my commanding officer before you, back in '97. He believed in the project. He believed the ends justified the means." Matthews shook his head. "Meridian was supposed to create elite field units for counter-espionage. They said it was voluntary." "It wasn't," Hayes said. "They experimented on their own. Memory conditioning, loyalty testing, neurochemical triggers. Monroe called it perfect obedience." Matthews stopped crawling. "Jesus, Robert. You're saying I was one of them," Hayes said quietly. "Ironshade wasn't just a code name. It was a conditioning profile. They made me into something they could control. Until Hadron Valley." The colonel turned toward him in the dim light. "That's why you vanished?" Hayes nodded. "When the project fell apart, I broke free, but they couldn't risk the truth coming out, so they erased me. They wrote my death into the records. They reached a ladder leading upward. Hayes went first, pushing open a rusty hatch that led to a deserted hangar. Moonlight streamed through cracked windows. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly into the night. Matthews climbed out behind him. "We can't stay here. Once they sweep the tunnels, we're boxed in." Hayes scanned the hangar and spotted an old Jeep covered by a tarp. "Then we drive." They peeled out of the base minutes later, headlights off, tires spitting gravel as the vehicle thundered down the back road. Behind them, searchlights pierced the sky. For a long time, neither man spoke. Only the engine and the wind filled the silence. Finally, Matthews said, "You still have that flash drive?" Hayes patted his jacket pocket. "Right here. But data's not enough. We need proof that Monroe's alive. And you think he's behind this whole operation?" Hayes stared out the window. "He's not just behind it. He's funding it. Meridian's evolved, it's gone private. Contractors, defense corporations, even politicians. Monroe built an empire from the shadows." Matthews clenched his jaw. "Then we take it apart piece by piece." Hayes nodded. "There's one place that still has records. The old Meridian archive bunker in West Virginia. If we can get there before they do, we can expose everything." The colonel smirked faintly. "Back to the beginning, huh?" "Always," Hayes said. They reached the foothills of Appalachia by dawn. Mist hung low over the trees. The bunker lay buried beneath an abandoned communications tower. Hayes led the way, cutting through brush until they reached a concrete door half swallowed by earth. He brushed away vines and entered a code on the faded keypad. Miraculously, the door clicked open. Inside, the bunker smelled of dust and rusted metal. Old computers lined the walls, their screens long dead. File cabinets stood like tombstones. "Looks like a ghost town," Matthews murmured. "Good," Hayes said. "Ghosts don't shoot back." They began searching. Hayes sifted through files while Matthews powered up a generator. After a few sputters, dim lights flickered to life. Hayes opened one of the drawers and his hand froze. "Colonel," he called quietly. Matthews walked over. Inside the drawer was a stack of personnel files. Names, photos, service numbers, all stamped Meridian active in faded red ink. But one stood out. Lieutenant Colonel Leonard Monroe, Director of Operations. Matthews exhaled sharply. "He's alive," Hayes nodded grimly. "And still running this." Suddenly the generator sputtered again and the lights died. A low hum filled the air, followed by a voice echoing from hidden speakers. "Hello, Robert." Hayes froze. The voice was smooth, confident, chillingly familiar. "Been a long time, hasn't it?" The voice continued. "You always were hard to kill." Matthews aimed his gun upward. "Monroe!" he shouted. "Show yourself." Laughter crackled through the speakers. Still the loyal soldier Matthews, always doing as you're told. Robert, on the other hand, he learned too much. Hayes clenched his fists. "You used us. You turned soldiers into test subjects. You volunteered," Monroe said calmly. "You wanted to serve your country. I just helped you become more efficient." "By erasing our minds," Hayes spat. "By perfecting them," Monroe replied. "You were my masterpiece, Ironshade. The first successful prototype. You should be proud." Hayes's voice turned cold. "I'm done being your weapon," Monroe chuckled. "Then you'll die as one." A gunshot rang out from the shadows, glass shattered, sparks flew. Hayes and Matthews dove for cover. Dozens of red laser sights cut through the dark. Armed men poured into the bunker. "Contact front," Matthews shouted, firing toward the door. Hayes moved like a phantom, rolling between pillars, taking out one mercenary after another. For his age, his precision was unreal, muscle memory from years of buried training. Bullets tore through file cabinets, papers fluttering like snow. Matthews covered the flank, but they were outnumbered. "Robert, we're pinned." Hayes ducked behind a console. His mind raced. "We don't need to win," he said. "We just need to light it up." He grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into a terminal, uploading everything to a dead satellite relay. "Once it hits the cloud, Monroe's empire burns." Matthews nodded. "I'll cover you," the upload began. A progress bar crawled across the screen. 60%, Hayes muttered. "Come on." A grenade rolled across the floor. Matthews kicked it back, but the blast tore through the far wall. Dust and smoke filled the room. 85%, Hayes shouted. Through the haze, a tall figure stepped into view, Leonard Monroe himself. His hair was gray, his uniform spotless, his eyes cold as winter steel. "Well done, Ironshade," he said. "Always finishing the mission even when you shouldn't." Hayes aimed his pistol. "You trained me too well for that." Monroe smiled thinly. "And yet you came right where I wanted you." He raised his own gun, but before he could fire, Matthews tackled him. The two men crashed into the console. The monitor shattered, sparks flying. Hayes lunged forward, grabbing Monroe by the collar. "Why?" he shouted. "Why keep it going?" "Meridian's dead." Monroe's eyes blazed. "Because the world still needs control. You saw what happens without it. Chaos, betrayal, endless war. Meridian keeps order. By enslaving soldiers? By saving humanity from itself." Hayes tightened his grip. "You don't get to decide that," Monroe sneered. "And you do?" Hayes stared at him, breathing hard. "No, but I can stop you." He drove his fist into Monroe's chest, sending him sprawling back against the terminal. Electricity arced as circuits overloaded. The room filled with blinding light. "Robert!" Matthews shouted. "It's gonna blow!" Hayes grabbed the flash drive from the port. "We're done here." They sprinted toward the exit as fire erupted behind them. The bunker collapsed in a roar of heat and thunder. Outside, dawn was breaking. The mountain shook, then fell silent. Matthews coughed, covered in ash. "You alive?" Hayes nodded, clutching the flash drive. "Barely, but it's over." "Monroe?" Hayes looked back at the smoking ruin. "Gone, this time for good." The colonel sighed in relief, then frowned. "What now?" Hayes stared at the horizon. "We finished the upload. Somewhere safe." They drove to a small ranger station a few miles away. The satellite connection there was old but functional. Hayes plugged in the drive and watched as encrypted files streamed into the net. "Where's it going?" Matthews asked. "Everywhere," Hayes said. "News outlets, watchdogs, veterans networks. By noon, the world will know about Meridian." The progress bar hit 100%. A final message flashed on screen. "Upload complete, truth restored." Hayes exhaled slowly. "It's done." Matthews smiled faintly. "You know, you could have just retired quietly like the rest of us." Hayes chuckled. "I tried that once. Didn't suit me." They sat in silence, watching the sunrise spill across the mountains. After a while, Matthews said, "What happens to Ironshade now?" Hayes stood, slipping his sunglasses back on. "He disappears again. The world doesn't need him anymore. The colonel nodded slowly. Maybe not. But the world could use a few more men like Robert Hayes. Hayes turned toward his truck. Keep the faith, Colonel. Matthews called after him. You sure you don't want to stay? We could use someone like you at the academy. Train the next generation. Hayes smiled faintly over his shoulder. They'll be fine. Just make sure they remember the ones who weren't. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and drove toward the horizon. As the vehicle disappeared into the morning light, the faint voice of a radio announcer played through static. Breaking news. Classified documents linked to a defunct military program known as Project Meridian have been leaked online. Officials have yet to comment. The world was changing again, but somewhere on a quiet road, an old soldier finally felt peace. The wind brushed against the open window as Hayes whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, mission complete. And for the first time in decades, Iron Shade vanished not into war but into freedom.